Hello everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Mario Silva, and in today's video, I actually wanted to talk about my thoughts on trying out a medium format camera for the first time. Specifically the Fuji GFX100S. This one right here. So I've actually never shot on a medium format camera, and I was very excited to try this camera out. So I was able to borrow it for about a week, and I also borrowed 3 lenses that came with it. I was able to borrow the Fujifilm GF lens 45-100. There's another big boy, which is the macro 120. Another big boy, which is the 110. And this one, which is the 50 GF Fujifilm lens. So just to preface this video, I've been shooting on Sony cameras for about 5 or 6 years now. And I started shooting on APS-C sensor cameras and then moved on to Sony full frame cameras. And all my thoughts and perspectives on this video are going to be based on that, the fact that I've been using Sony for such a long time. So this video is not meant to be an in-depth review of the Fuji GFX100S. And I just wanted to give you my perspective as a Sony shooter, what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And also a little bit of background as well. Sony isn't the only camera I've shot with. I actually started shooting on a Nikon, a D50-100 I believe, and then I moved on to the D800. I was shooting video at that time with the Nikon. Don't ask me why. And then I also got a chance to shoot weddings on a GH3 back in the day, and then a little bit on a GH4. And then I also shot on a Canon C100 cinema camera. I've actually shot with quite a few camera brands, but Sony is the one that I've stuck with. The first thing that you need to know is the camera sensor on the medium format camera is actually bigger than that of a full frame sensor. And hence the confusion, because you know full and medium, you may think that medium is smaller than full. So a full frame sensor is about 36 to 24 millimeters. And the sensor of a medium format camera, particularly the one that is on this Fuji camera, is about 43 to 32 millimeters. So the sensor of this medium format camera is roughly 79% larger than that of a full frame camera. So the crop factor for this Fuji GFX100S and also the 100 is about 0.79. And you have to take this crop factor into consideration when looking at your lenses. So this lens, 45-100 mil, is in full frame terms about 36 to 75 millimeters. The maximum aperture on this lens is an f4, but in full frame terms, that's about a 3.2. So you're actually getting a little bit more light than you thought you would with an f4 on one of these lenses. So unfortunately, I only had a week or so to play with this camera, but these are my thoughts after using it for that time. So let's first talk about a few of the things that I like about this camera. This camera has a megapixel count of 102. You heard me right, 102. That's about 4 times that of the A7 III and 6 or 7 times that of the A7S III, which is really insane. To be honest though, unless you're really printing big billboards, 102 megapixels is really an overkill even for most professional uses. The photos that come out of this 102 megapixel camera are really sharp, and because it's Fuji, the colors are really nice as well. Talking about color on the Fuji cameras, another thing that I like is that you can get film simulations directly in camera by Fuji. So you get Provia, Velvia, Eterna, and things like that. In comparison to other medium format cameras, this one looks a little bit more like a DSLR. So it will be a familiar look if you have never shot on a medium format camera before. It's very solidly built and it has dual SD card slots. One thing that I really like about this camera is the top display over here. That lets you toggle between some of your exposure settings as well as your histogram. I actually found myself using this top display quite a lot when I was shooting, and I found it very useful. Another thing that I really like about this camera is that it has a movie and a still switch. So depending on what you're shooting, you can just do a quick switch there, and all the settings in your menu are going to be according to whatever switch you have. So if you have it on movie mode, then all your settings are going to be related to video. And once you switch it back to stills, everything's going to be related to photos. I find that the menus are a lot easier to navigate depending on what you're shooting, unlike Sony's popular or not so popular menus. Well, pre-A7S III, all Sony menus are just very hard to decipher. But the menus in here are very easy to understand, and you're able to find what you need very quickly. In terms of the screen, it does not have a full flip out screen. It has an articulating screen that swivels up this way, and it also allows you to swivel it this way if you are shooting in portrait mode. So that's a little bit useful. Still a better screen than the A7 III or other Sony cameras, for example, that only have the flip up screen. So you can also charge this camera directly via USB-C. So if you are running out of juice and you're shooting in studio, for example, you can just plug it in to USB-C to a power bank and you can keep your camera powered. I brought this to a shoot and the shoot lasted about 3 hours, and I found that I only needed that one battery because they only gave me one battery to try this out. So the battery life on this camera, in my opinion, from the time that I was using it, is quite decent. Maybe just a little bit less than the A7 III's battery, but pretty good in general. So in general, medium format cameras are not really meant for video, or at least for serious video work. They're more meant for serious photography, portrait work, and studio work. But this camera comes equipped with very decent video features. So it comes with the ability to shoot FLOG, which is the lock setting for Fuji. You can also shoot in HLG as well if you like. Another really cool feature is that you can shoot 420 10-bit internally on this camera. And if you have an external recorder, that can become 422 10-bit or even ProRes RAW, which is very insane coming from a medium format camera. There are a few limitations though when it comes to video, which I'll be talking about a little bit later, but the fact that you can get that quality of video out of this is very impressive. This camera has a microphone jack and a headphone jack, which is handy for video. This camera also has a few advanced audio features, such as audio limiter directly in camera. And it also has 5-axis in-body stabilization, which makes it very useful for video work. If you want to see how this camera performs in video, I have a video coming up next, so make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to be in the know when that video comes out. It's going to be cool. And in that video, I'll be showing you a lot of footage that I shot with this camera. And if you're watching later on in the future, then it'll be linked up here or in the description box below. In terms of autofocus, this camera has face detection and also eye autofocus. And that applies for photo mode and video mode. So in terms of video, the maximum resolution is 4K at 30 frames per second. And in 1080p, you can only go up to 60 frames per second, which is a little bit unfortunate. I was hoping that you could get at least 120 frames per second in 1080p, but we're not getting that. Another thing that I didn't like is that the body here on the right, particularly, it's a little bit too wide, so it didn't fit two of the gimbals that I have. I've been shooting on mirrorless cameras and I've been very comfortable shooting on smaller mirrorless bodies. So when I got a chance to shoot with this, it's actually a lot heavier than the Sony A7 III that I mostly use. And I found that I had to get reaccustomed to shooting with larger camera bodies, like for example when I used to shoot on a Nikon DSLR, the D800. So that's not a fault of the camera itself, that's just me having gotten too comfortable shooting on smaller camera bodies over the years. So the body itself weighs about 2 pounds. And once you add one of these Fujinon lenses, which are all quite massive, the weight really adds up very quickly. And if you wanted to rig it up with a cage or a microphone, a shotgun mic, some filters at the front, it can become a very heavy setup, at which point you might as well just get a cinema camera and shoot video on a cinema camera. Another thing with the size of this medium format camera is that it makes it a little bit less flexible and portable. Sometimes I want to go out and don't want to carry too much with me, so I just bring my small mirrorless camera and it can fit almost anywhere. But if you have one of these, you're going to have to think twice whether you want to bring it with you or not. In terms of rolling shutter for video, it's actually not too bad. I would say it's a little bit similar to the A7 III. And for a medium format camera, I would say that the rolling shutter is not bad at all. For video specifically, I found that the autofocus was a little bit flaky. It was not always accurate. Sometimes it took some time to hunt for the subject. Even though it has eye autofocus, in my opinion, it's not as snappy or as quick as other Sony cameras. The Sony A7 III, even though it doesn't have eye autofocus in video mode, it only has face detection. I found that that was a lot better and a lot more accurate as opposed to this one. When I'm shooting on the Sony A7 III, I can just trust that the autofocus is going to work 90% of the time. On this one, when I was shooting video on this, I had to keep looking at the screen to make sure that I was in focus. Another thing about this camera that I really quite like is that it only shoots 5 frames per second. So don't expect to shoot sports or high action scenes with this camera. So overall, it was a fun experience trying out a medium format camera for the first time. It's exciting to see that a lot of manufacturers are putting a lot of higher end video features in traditionally photo cameras like this medium format camera. I think this camera is well suited for studio work and portrait work. At this price range, if you wanted to shoot a lot of video and want an equal capability or functionality between photo and video at this price range, I'll probably go with the Sony A1. If your work requires high megapixel counts, if you shoot a lot in control studio environments, I think this is a really good choice if you like the medium format look as well and that Fuji color science. So I'm a little sad that I have to return this in the next couple of days and that I can get more time to play with this, but I hope that this video gives you a little bit more insight into what a medium format camera is if you have never shot on one before. So I hope you found this video informational and useful. If you did, please hit that like button. That'll greatly support the channel. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. That will be greatly appreciated. And that is all, guys. I'll see you in the next one.